Let me officially welcome one and all. Let me also welcome Rich Ross. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Now, I've been told that not only are you an aquatic biologist, but you are actually a senior aquatic biologist here.
I am senior. That's one better than aquatic biologist.
What does that mean that you do here in light of images like this?
It means this is going to sound really, really silly to say, but it means that I'm a more senior biologist. It means I've been around longer, so I know how things work around here, and so I get to do more focused projects because all the other stuff that I would have been doing before I was a senior biologist should be rote and easy and dialed in now.
Does that mean you do less of the scrubbing of exhibits?
No. We all do all the scrubbing. That's how it works.
I was wondering how he would answer when he had another biologist around that can listen in.
No, the answer is no. The scrubbing is part of the job, and it's actually a really important part of the job because feeding and scrubbing and just looking at the tanks and looking at the animals in there is how you make determinations on how they're doing. So seeing them every day in different ways is important. So I probably wouldn't give up the scrubbing even if that were possible.
I think we'd probably worry if you did give up on that. Now, you said you get to focus a little bit more in this slightly higher position. Some of your focus, I think, involves what we're looking at right now. And even more, do you folks recognize animals like these? Do we know this one? Which one is this one? What do we have here? An octopus. Fantastic. Well done, everyone, so far. How about down here? What are we looking at there? A squid? We all agree with that? All right, last but not least, what are we looking at up here? Very quick. Well done, the cuttlefish.
The cuttlefish.
They do look quite similar, but they clearly have some differences. Tell us more, Rich.
The difference between the three, and cephalopods in general, means the defining thing is they all have their limbs extending in a ring from their mouth parts. So in there is the mouth part, and there's the mouth part, and up under there is the mouth part. And the main difference between these three is the octopus has no bones whatsoever. The cuttlefish has what's called a cuttle bone, and it's not a fish. We should probably call it just cuttles, not cuttlefish, like we call jellies instead of jellyfish. But that's...
Wait, does that mean we don't call a seahorse a seahorse? No, okay.
No, we just call them horse. So they have a bone that actually goes in this whole area behind them. It's called the mantle, and that's what's responsible for their buoyancy. They can control it. They pump an ammonia-like fluid into that and out of that, and it changes their buoyancy. And this is a squid, and a squid has what's called a pen or a glottis, which looks like a kind of like cellophane, like a light plastic that gives some rigidity to their whole mantle. Something else that you should know is that octopus have arms, not legs and not tentacles. They're arms. And the difference between an arm and a tentacle is generally the arms have suckers that go all up and down their entire length. Also, the arms are used more like arms than they are like legs. And a tentacle, this is a squid tentacle, and it doesn't have suckers but for the tip. So a cuttle and a squid both have 8 arms and then 2 tentacles, and those are the tentacles that shoot out to grab the prey from a distance and pull it in, and then it's manipulated with the arms to where it needs to be manipulated. That's a whole lot of words that I said in a row.
A little bit of detailed knowledge on cephalopod vocabulary and biology as well. It's pretty interesting, actually, and some of those things, even though I've been fascinated by animals like this a long time, I didn't even know. Now, how did your fascination with these animals start out in the first place?
It started as a kid. They're just the coolest animal in the world. And they are. They've got arms, they've got fins, they've got tentacles, they've got suckers, they've got 3 hearts, they've got a ring-shaped brain. They can go on land, they can crawl from one part of the sea across land to another. There's some species of them that fly. What is not to like about this group of animals?
Can I ask a quick question?
It's your show.
Based on your fantastic, fantastic reaction, ma'am, they can fly?
Yeah, there's a squid. It's been documented in several squid over the years, but it's been really focusedly documented this year. There's a small squid. It's about 8 inches long, and it jets up out of the water. It uses its jet to get out, and then it spreads its fin, which is bigger, so it's more modified. And it also spreads its arms apart, and its arms have got a webbing between them, so it actually ends up having 2 wings, and they can fly for like 14 seconds. And they don't just, it's controlled flight. It's not powered flight, but it's controlled. And some other species of squid have been known to do that. I can do weird ventriloquist things with my voice.
I'm impressed.
And so yeah, they can fly, and it's crazy awesome.
Have any of you folks ever seen flying fish, maybe soaring across the surface of the ocean? Did you ever think that maybe one of those was a squid?
Could be.
Fantastic.
Yeah, they're really neat.
You might want to adjust your microphone just a little bit.
There? Down? How's that? Okay.
Fantastic.
I actually got a text last night from a friend who said he was eating some of those flying squid at sushi, and I was very jealous. That's very cool.
So you appreciate these animals in more ways than just looking at them?
Absolutely. If they are sustainably fished, which a lot of cephalopods are, I see no reason not to eat them.
Yeah, a pretty big deal, particularly around here. I hear Monterey has something to do with that.
Yeah, they do. It's Dory toothus now is the market squid, and they show up once or twice a year, I think, in huge conglomerations, and they're fished, and it doesn't seem to impact their populations at all, so it's all good with me.
Now, recently, you have not been in the press for eating squid,
no.
But you have been in the press.
Yeah.
Why are you, can we call it fame?
No.
Okay. Well, why are you receiving attention these days?
This octopus up in the corner, or this octopus here, is one that was described in a scientific note in 1991, and that's all we've heard of it since, and then it kind of just fell off the radar. And it is, in my opinion, the most beautiful octopus I've seen. It's got stripes and spots. Stripes and spots on the same animal is pretty wicked cool, I think. And about a year ago, Roy Caldwell, a Cal Academy fellow who's at UC Berkeley, and I were able to get our hands on some. We never thought we would ever see them. It was a big surprise. We were working with a smaller cousin of this octopus, and the collector from that area called and said they had some of these, and then we've had them in secret for the last year. I'm supposed to call it at my secret home lab, because just calling it a home lab sounds silly, but if you add secret, then it's exciting.
Wait, did you say home?
Yeah, yeah.
As in, like, downstairs in the basement, or at your
No,
actual
at my house.
home?
At my house. There was it wasn't possible to bring them in originally at the time, and I'm still one of those people who does his work at home, because I started doing that, and I like it, and it allows me to experiment with things we may not have room for or desire to show here, which is completely understandable. So we were able to get these.
So you get to explore a little bit on your own, maybe outside of work in addition.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic.
If I can. I mean, I'd rather do it here, but of course, public institution, there's always limited funds and limited space, and completely understandable. So back of house projects that no one is seeing, you know, I'm happy to do it at my house if I need to. So especially with this animal.
Stripes and spots.
Yeah. Stripes and spots.
What else?
What else? They do a whole bunch of weird things. Do we have slides so I can talk? They have stripes and spots. I just still can't get over that. They're also what we discovered, and what the guy who wrote the notes said originally. They this is a very cool video where you get a bilateral color display. So that's actually the animal doing its color display on its own. It's not a shadow or anything. One half of the body goes black, and the other half is less black. And you see that in cephalopods from time to time. In almost all of them, they have the ability to do that. There was much jumping up and down in my secret home lab when that video was taken.
Jumping up and down by you, right?
By me, yeah. It was, yeah. And then the first time they mated, there was much jumping up and down. A transcendent experience, if I've ever had one. So they mate. They do two weird things with mating. The general story of octopus, I think probably everyone's heard that, is the mother lays one clutch of eggs and tends them, and then gives her entire life to them, and then after they hatch, she dies, and it's very tragic and sad. With these guys, not so much. These guys she'll lay eggs constantly. It's called idioparity, as opposed to semmelparous. One bunch of eggs, and that's it, versus lots over their lifetime. So the female I have at home has been laying eggs since February, March, April, for about a year now, just constantly on eggs. And the one we have downstairs, we completely expect the same thing from. And they also mate in this kind of beak-to-beak pattern, or sucker-to-sucker, right? Because all cephalopods have a parrot-like beak. And that's a weird way to mate, because cephalopods can also be cannibalistic. So this is a really kind of interesting mating strategy, and we're learning a lot about it. It turns out you need a male that's at least the same size as the female. Otherwise, the female gets grumpy, and the female can overpower the male. But if you have a male that's bigger, seem to want to continue overpowering her after mating, and they can live together, which is very exciting too. We have 2 of them on display here. Most octopus, or I would say all octopus on display ever, are single specimens because you can't trust them to eat each other or not. These guys you can.
So look out for
that's science.
Grumpy
eat each
octopuses.
Other. Yeah, definitely grumpy octopuses. But they're fine. I've got 2 pair at home that have been living together for a long time, almost a year, and so I expect the pair here to be just fine. We're probably also going to try to do a male and 2 females and see how that goes. And it looks like in the wild, they can live in aggregations of like 40 animals, and sometimes they share the same den. So we're trying to get an expedition together to go down and take a look as well.
And sharing a den together, that's not normal for these types of animals, is it?
No, most octopuses don't do that at all. I've seen it a few times at home. It's not like a long-term sharing of the same space. The den is basically if you were sharing a sleeping bag with somebody. It would be that kind of proximity.
Somewhat like a hostel.
Okay.
Closer than a hostel.
Closer than a hostel.
Gotcha.
A hostel. And so yeah, it's very cool stuff and very exciting stuff. And it's undescribed. This doesn't have a scientific name yet. So we're calling it the larger Pacific striped octopus, and we're working with some colleagues to write the descriptive paper. We're also doing a behavioral paper because they do, besides the mating, they do all kinds of weird stuff. They hunt in weird ways, and they're just a whole lot of stuff to learn about these guys.
So this is in essence a new species.
Yeah.
Fantastic. At least new to science.
New to science.
Question. Yes, ma'am.
How
do you tell the male from the female?
How do you tell the male from the female? In this species is actually very easy. If you're looking at the animal from the top, they've got 4 pairs of arms, right? So this one and this one are pair 1. So the third right arm from the top is on all octopods and all cuttles. I'm not sure about squids. That's the mating arm, and it's called the hectocotyledged arm. So there's a groove that runs all the way down it. It's a specialized arm. It's different from the other ones. And at the tip is what's called the ligula, which actually has got erectile tissue, which is insanely cool. That was worked on last year. And that's the arm they use to transfer sperm packets from the male to the female. So on this octopus, this is one of the insane things about them, the hectocotylus is permanently white. So if you see the octopus from underneath, you can see kind of a white stripe that goes down that one arm. And so they're very, very easy to sex, which is not true of any other cephalopod.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's fantastic.
Got further images, and are we still looking at the same thing?
Yeah. These are developing eggs, and you can see that this is the mother's arm behind it, and that's one of her suckers. And she'll constantly groom the eggs, keeping them clear of debris or fungus or anything that shouldn't be there. And this is one of the paralarvae hatching, coming out of the egg. I worked to get that image for about a month, so I'm really excited with it.
Size-wise,
it's this big. These things are just like, no, they're
sea monsters.
The octopus itself is about that big, about 10 inches arm tip to arm tip. So this is probably about 5 millimeters across. They're not huge.
Pretty tiny.
Yeah.
So you can really imagine that photographic work and his patience for this beautiful image.
Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome.
My daughter and my wife's patience, I think.
So this is a very good point, because a lot of times here in a place like the Academy, we expect our biologists to have great success like this. We don't necessarily always expect them to be doing it at home, as you seem to do, and you had a lot of success before you even worked here, didn't you?
Yeah. When I got back into keeping marine animals, I took a break for a while because I was on the road a lot doing my other old career, and then we had a kid, and I became the stay-at-home dad because a juggler has less insurance than a financial planner. I don't know if you knew that, but if you think about it for a second, it makes a lot of sense.
You were the juggler.
I was the juggler.
Just making sure.
And so I get to stay at home, which was pretty cool. And after about 5 years, my daughter started school, and my wife said that I needed to talk to adults because I was crazy. But during that time, I got back into keeping saltwater a lot and started working with the dwarf cuttlefish, Sepia bendensis, and closed the life cycle on them at my house. So that was another first. So
and closing the life cycle means?
I define it as you have eggs that were fertilized and laid in captivity, and then the offspring of those eggs fertilize and lay their own eggs that then hatch.
Now, That doesn't sound like that big of a deal. I don't mean to step on any toes.
Well, then you do it.
This is a good point. So what are the difficulties of this that make it so important?
Well, first, if it's a new animal, and not many people have been keeping these cuttles when I started doing it, the word on the street was that don't do it. They don't live very long. They're hard to keep, and then they die in transit, or they don't make it. We don't need to talk about that. That was just, in my opinion, most of that was a misunderstanding of their life cycle. So if you get an animal that only lives a year and it's 9 months old, you're not going to have much time with it. It's not necessarily the husbandry. So the first thing with those was getting smaller ones and figuring out that, no, they aren't necessarily as fragile as everybody thought, and then getting them to live and thrive, and then figuring out how to introduce them to, because you can't tell male and female on the cuttles. So I built this elaborate tank that had dividers in it, and each divider had a door in it, and the door could either be opaque or transparent. So I would put two animals, I wanted to see what they would do next to each other, and I put the transparent door in and see how they would look at each other and try to determine if they were males and females from that. And then I take the door out and see if they would mate or not, and or if they were just coupling as males, going, are you a male or a female, and I'm going to fight with you. So there's a whole lot of trial and error. And as it turns out, now that it's all been done, those cuttles are not so hard to breed. But now that we understand that. So that was what was involved in it. This was the same thing with the larger Pacific striped octopus. It was getting them, making sure that we knew the husbandry just to keep them healthy for a while. And excuse me, it was I had a banana. And
bananas will do that.
Bananas will do that. And then putting them together and observing them together and making sure they were okay. And the real hard part with these guys is raising the hatchlings, right? Because they're very small. It turns out with the cuttles, they're really a kind of a miniature adult, so you can give them a shrimp called a mysid, which is, I'll stop moving, which is small, and they can eat it right away. If you look at those larvae over there, can you point so I don't have to get up on my mic? Point to the front end. Those are octopus paralarvae, right? So they still have some more developing to do after they've hatched. And you can see their arms are very short, and they don't really have much of a beak. So figuring out what they're going to eat and being able to supply it to them in enough is the next hurdle. That's a long answer to your question.
It's a good answer, and it kind of leads into what I'm thinking about is that, again, this is going on in your home.
Yes.
So, well, you challenged me, why don't I do it? I can't. I have a rather small San Francisco apartment. How did you get all this done at home? What kind of setup do you have?
We're really fortunate because we have an extra room, and my wife likes that I do this. So every time we get done with a cycle of animals, I say, I'm going to break some of these tanks down. And she says, no, don't do that, because something's going to come. And I was really, because now I'm doing this. I've been doing this here for 5 years. So then I go home and I do it still at home. So it's like work all the time. And I was really convinced last year that I was going to just break most of it down and try to do it all at work. And she said no, and then a month later these octopus showed up. So it was actually perfect that she made me not do it. So no, we're just very, very fortunate that my family supports it and thinks it's great. And yeah.
And I feel like with getting to watch things like this, some of us might understand some of that.
Yeah. Oh, this was here. These are Cephalopods. It's the broad club cuttle, and they actually get about this big. So we were doing some initial assessments about how we could keep them, and if we could, and if it made sense. Really, really amazing animals.
Almost looks like a hovering jet airplane or something.
Yeah, and they can get all kinds of color patterns that flare across their noses. They're an amazing group of animals. Like I said before, what's not to like?
Now, all of this work you do from cuttles to the octopus, all of these, how does this align with everything we're doing here? How are you helping to explore, explain, and sustain? I think the sustain part is
the sustains part is by trying to breed it. The more we can breed it, the better, because the less we have to extract anything from the wild, which we want to do sustainably anyway. It's right over there. And explore and explain is the mission. So if we don't get some of these animals and see what they do, we can't do those two things.
And I'd say the exploring, finding new species, that's pretty close to it, isn't it?
That's pretty much, yeah. And you know, going down there, we want to go down. The striped octopus is from the Pacific side of Nicaragua and Central America. So we want to get down there and see what they're doing in these aggregations. I mean, it might be possible to put a 500-gallon tank together and have 20 of these animals together, which would be a fantastic exhibit, I think. So, and then what is their social aspect? What are they doing? And so it'd be important to know that.
And real quickly, when you mentioned putting together some 500-gallon aquarium with however many individuals in, that would be kind of a first.
Yeah. To have a conglomeration of octopuses together, in captivity, that'd
pretty
be great.
Impressive.
Yeah.
So, even though we don't all realize that what you're doing all the time is kind of, well, setting records, kind of breaking ground in this kind of field, within the field, you get a lot of recognition. So you can imagine we are really glad to have someone like you around here at the Academy.
That's very nice of you to say.
Why, thank you. You get a few more opportunities other than just the cephalopods, so you get some other outside work to keep you busy as well.
Yeah, and a lot of the exhibits we have here, we're constantly learning about them. No one's done, I'm lead on the Philippine coral reef tank, so I'm kind of, that's my baby. And no one's ever done a closed system reef tank that big before, so we're constantly learning how that works. All husbandry, I call myself a husbandry scientist, and so my goal is to learn how to keep things thriving and breeding and alive. And everything we're doing here at the Academy is, in some sense, a constant experiment to learn how to do it better. And so that's what we're all striving to do.
And
better,
as you
better.
said, all of that helps us not have to take these animals out of the wild, but still be able to share that they exist with all of you folks as well.
Absolutely. And also, too, because this is a pet baby of mine, is to be able to responsibly take the animals out of the wild. I think there's nothing intrinsically wrong with taking some animals out for research or for display and things like that. What we want to avoid is overuse. And if we understand how the populations work, we can do it just fine. I mean, we're always going to need genetics from the wild as well, but if we can minimize it, we win. And winning is good.
I think we all like winning. Now, the very final question I have for you, sir, revolves around this picture here.
Yeah.
And your past experience as a juggler. You've never juggled these animals, have you?
No, that would be inhumane.
Good. We're glad to hear that. Why exactly were you wearing this on your head?
This was in Tonga and in like 2005, and I was hired to consult on a new coral farm that was starting over there. One of the big things to try to do now is to farm the coral. So you fragment some of the wild coral and bring it to this farm area, and you let it grow out there, and then you take pieces of that, because you can break off pieces of coral, glue them to something, and they'll grow, and farm them for export to the hobby market, which I think is a fantastic use. Also makes local people really value that resource that's right off their front doorstep, instead of just seeing it as a way, how much food can we get out of the ocean? So anyway, we had spent the day talking about sustainable collection, how to just take little bits of the corals. You don't need big chunks and things like that. And then this octopus swims by, and this is in Tonga, where everyone's like a subsistence farmer or fisherman. And so this octopus comes by, the guy jumps in the boat and grabs a hammer and proceeds to chase the octopus with a hammer underwater for about 15 feet of reef, flipping rocks and things like that. And we came up and I said, so we were working all day on not doing that, why were you doing that? And he said, because the octopus would bite you. And I said, no, it won't. And I took the octopus and I put it on my head and went, see, it doesn't bite. And luckily it didn't bite. So that worked out really well for me. But then we talked about other ways to catch the octopus that are not destructive, because especially if you're underwater, there are much easier ways to fish for an octopus than to try to, bludgeon it. So
anyone ever tried swinging a hammer underwater? It's
Yeah.
not as effective as you might think.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, if you just had a jar, you could get it to go in the jar and you'll be done.
So not only are you working with animals, but working with people as well, helping them gain a little better understanding.
Yeah, well, I think it's very important that the local people see some value to the resources that are near them. And unfortunately, if they don't have some kind of export value there, they turn to the curio trade or they turn to destructive fishing practices. And who can blame them? If my daughter was really hungry, I would want to get as much fish as I could possibly catch as well. But if we can change things to this kind of farming of stuff from the ocean, then they respect it more and everybody wins, like I said.
This is yet another reason we really like biologists like this, because they really care a lot. Can you tell? Yeah, he cares quite a bit. Now, I have had a great chance to ask him all kinds of questions. Do any of you folks have any questions about any of this that you would like to press with expert Rich Ross?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. Will we be able to raise them? Yeah, we're trying hard. So I've got a line on some new possible first foods. That's really the issue. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to... So to feed something live that's really small, you have to grow something even smaller that's also alive. So now I have to raise food to feed the baby octopus. So we're working on that. I have a couple things kind of in the hopper downstairs that I have to get going today because I'm starting to see some new hatchlings at home that I want to bring in. I think the ones we have downstairs, we still have a month or two before those eggs start to hatch. But yeah, no, that's the goal. Can we do it? And the paralarval octopus are tough. There's only a couple of places, there's really only one that I know of that says we've had success doing it, but no one can replicate what they did. So it's a big deal. In Europe, octopus is used for food much more. So if we can close that life cycle, it'd be much easier to raise the octopus for food.
And as you said, raising the animal also involves looking at the ecology of it and kind of creating its own food chain right there wherever you're raising it.
Exactly.
A lot of work.
And that's one of the reasons why doing this at my house when I started worked out, because we live in Alameda, which is right on the bay. So there is a bait shop where you can get a grass shrimp that's local to the bay that if I lived inland I couldn't get. And I could also go and get a fishing license and collect crabs myself to feed some of these things. So without those two things, I think it would be really hard. Food, imagine that. Food is important for living animals. So
word has it that is correct.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that is supported by someone besides me.
Yes, ma'am. Question.
How long does it take before the edge of the larger Pacific striped octopus? We're not sure. Because they lay eggs constantly, all I can tell you is the time from the very first egg I saw laid to the first hatchling that I saw. And that was about 3 or 4 months. But I don't know if those first eggs were fertile or not because she lays them all in the same spot. So it's really general of how long we think. And it's been, since the last bunch of hatchings I had, excuse me, it's been about 2 months. So somewhere in there, I think. And you had a second question? We might get some more flamboyant cuttlefish. We're working with Monterey. Monterey, the Ceph people there and here, we work really well together. And they want us, they're breeding flamboyants very well. And they want us to continue to do that because we're so close. So I told them, we were talking about this last week, we might have a pair or a trio back of house. I don't know if we'll put them back on display or not. So we'll see how that goes. And that's important, right? So they're breeding all these flamboyants. If nobody else is doing it, they end up having only the same genetic stock. So they need us to be working with a different arm that we can then come back and breed together later on.
Great point.
So that's the plan. It's so... There's so much to do, you know. We could do, I could take over the entire downstairs just for cephalopods, but other people would get upset.
Don't tell the directors of the academy, please.
Oh, don't tell them.
They already know.
They won't.
Do we need to recruit people to raise more cephalopods?
That's outside of the sphere of my influence.
Not quite yet. Gotcha. Great questions. Any other questions before we lose this gentleman to probably scrubbing an exhibit space?
Oh, yeah, with this sponge.
If you ever wondered what kind of a special sponge we have to use on our very special windows...
Magic eraser. Don't use it on dry acrylic, just on wet. The Broad Club need, about displaying them, they need a very large exhibit. And we currently don't have something that we are looking to convert over to more cephalopods. We have a lot of cephalopods on display for a public aquarium, more than most. And so as much as I'd love to do the Broad Clubs again, what we learned from the year we did them was, oh yeah, no, we need something big. Yeah. I was actually just, when I was at Monterey last week, we were designing a baffle maze so you could keep them more tightly packed, so they could be in the same water but not seeing each other, as a way to maybe keep them from jetting too hard. So we'll see how it goes.
Always different considerations with all of these species, and somehow you keep it all straight.
I try.
Well, let's give Rich a great big thank you for this time he has spent with us.
Thank you very much.
And additionally, thanks to all of you folks for joining us today, learning a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes, here, and sometimes beyond the scenes as well.
Good point.
If anybody has any additional questions, we'll be here for a few more minutes. But thanks again for coming in, and everybody enjoy the rest of Sunday.